Welcome. Welcome to Seeing with Your Soul. Thank you so much for taking time to even to get on here and have this conversation. So it's really much appreciated.
Good morning, Tisha. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so we're just gonna get right into it. So you are a spiritual teacher, which is who I love. I just love like all this wisdom and knowledge and learning from so many, different, people, as well as an author. But before we even really dive deep into like the titles and all that good stuff, like I think it's really important for like everyone to really know what's your journey, like how did you get here, like how did you even get to like us conversate, not like how that happened, but just to even be able to like share this message and stuff. Like tell me about that, the whole journey.
The whole journey in a nutshell.
Yeah. I'm always fascinated with it, and like I said, I believe that everyone needs to hear that because everyone's on a different path and a different journey, and it's a different process. And I think like the more that people can really like share their story of like how they became this spiritual teacher, how they became this author, how they became this presenter, how they became this person who had like this retreat, all those good things that people see. It was like, okay, how did you get here? Like, how did you get here?
My teenage era was brought to an abrupt end through a near-death car accident where I actually did die in the car accident itself at the age of 19. And what actually initiated even that was approximately 2 weeks prior to that, my very first love, my very first girlfriend, who I just started to date. I think it was about 2 or 3 weeks into the dating. I had expressed at one particular evening a great deal of romantic love for her, but in a very poetic fashion. And I felt my heart being activated like never before at the time. And I was very aware of that also. And then we got out of the car after getting home, went up into her house, and she started to pull back. And I could see it. It's like I could read her completely and I could feel it. And at that point, she didn't want to see me for a little bit. She wanted to have a bit of a rest. But inside, I knew that she had recoil because of the fear of love, the actual fear of love. And yet we were quite resonant together. And I went home, and the following weekend, my buddies, my male friends, they wanted to go to the mountain region to a party, to just with all guys, teenage guys, and they wanted to go on a bit of a drinking binge, so to speak. And I went up with them. I went up with them on that weekend because she didn't want to be with me, my girlfriend. And I wasn't feeling like drinking, and I wasn't a very big drinker to begin with. And that evening, every glass or every mouthful I had tasted bitter. It didn't taste like that nice, typical beer drink, right? Because I could feel it was so contrary to the taste of the love that I had experienced by the intimacy moment with my girlfriend. So coming down from that mountain region was that night when I had the car accident. And to this day, I have no memory of what actually happened. I have no memory of hitting another car. I only remember waking up out of the car accident with the ambulance drivers putting me on a stretcher. And then I started speaking to them about love and about what the world needs. And they started smiling and like chuckling as if like they assumed I could have been maybe drunk or in a euphoric space. And at that moment, I could see there was a faint, hazy gold light everywhere, all around us. But I was speaking from a whole different state of consciousness. So from that day onwards, I felt like I was a 3-year-old child in a 19-year-old body all over again, and having to adapt to a 19-year-old body all the way into my adult life, still remaining with that same vulnerability, openness, tenderness of a 3-year-old heart. And my mother knew that was the case on some level. She overprotected me between myself and my father quite considerably. And she knew that I was having a lot of spontaneous spiritual and mystical experiences during the next 3 years while still being at home up until the age of 22. And they were very quite considerable experiences that were occurring during that time also. So there's a lot of acclimating to this new state, you could say, a lot of recalibration taking place, adjusting to this adult world, looking through the eyes of a 3-year-old, but now I'm 19, going on to 20, 21, now 22. And between the age of 21 and 22, because of all this, I began a 12 months mediumship and psychic development course so that I could actually open up to this new sensitivity and use it in a better capacity, you could say, a more dedicated capacity to be able to be of service to other human beings. It was very natural for me then to consider that I was now on the planet, literally on planet Earth, to be here of service to fellow human beings. That's how I felt. And during that time, I also started practicing a very ancient meditation from India called Tratak, which is all about gazing at a candle flame. And this I would do of a night time, just before going to sleep. And then I would blow out the candle at the end of the meditation, close my eyes, watch the light within. Still the flame was still there flickering inside, or it was going very still, turning into a round ball inside my forehead, sometimes going into a pinpoint, and then all of a sudden expanding out. And after a few months of this happening, it kept expanding. It never stopped, expanded, it intensified within my forehead, you could say, within my third eye. But then this one particular night, it kept expanding, intensifying, started filling the whole body. And I was very aware. It was so tangible, it was mind-boggling to say the least. It was really mind-boggling. And I was already prepared how to breathe, to be able to handle this possibility. And of course, there's a little bit of a heart speeding up happening because it's outside of the norm. And my body became filled with the light, then all of a sudden the body form disappeared. And in that moment, when the body form disappeared, I became aware of being consciousness, of being awareness, sitting, you could say, within this formless light that was so bright, beyond the description of physical brightness, and within that brightness, there was a pure quality of bliss, which wasn't physical. It was just pure, the bliss of light, the bliss of awareness, and it was extraordinary. In that moment, I felt like I'm ready to disappear. I'm ready to disappear into that forever. And some part of me possibly did want to as well, because of that rejection from 3 years ago with my very first love, my very first girlfriend. But at that moment, there was some sort of existential indication that no, it's not time to go right now. It's not time to disappear forever. I have work ahead of me. And so I had to remember how to come back into the body. There was no sense of body form, no sense of breathing, no sense of a heartbeat. So I had to just somehow remember how to move the hands and then take a breath, and then slowly came back into form, then lie down on the bed and just said, "Good night, world." That's it. So from that point onwards, that gave me like a guide stick, you could say, knowing that is a reality, that when thine two eyes become one, thy body will be filled with light. When thy two eyes, in other words, when duality dissolves into that sense of oneness, one consciousness, Thy body will be filled with light. It will be revealed. The inner light will be revealed. It was absolutely tangible revelation for me. So that's what I realized I had to bring to fellow human beings and to my family.
Oh my gosh, so there was so much in that story. I'm just like writing these little notes down, like, okay, I gotta say this, I gotta say that. First of all, like, I got like serious chills just listening to that story. And that oneness that you're talking about and that inner light and stuff, like, I'm still like seeking that. Like, as much as like this awakening and this journey that I've been on and all these different things, like, that's it. It's that what you just described. Like, sometimes I'll just be sitting there and I'll just like, and all of a sudden my heart will start like racing, and I can feel like something is gonna happen, and then I shut it down. And because there's still this little fear that's in there, like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna see? Like, or what is this, or what is that? But like, I sometimes like feel this, but then I consciously like I shut it down. But I want to go back. So 19, and boom, you're like just thrown in there. Like, I mean, no preparation from coming from like a conscious level, a human level. Like, they just throw you in there and like, here, look, I'm going to take you back to your inner child when you were 3 years old, before the world put their hands on you and started conditioning you. And we're going to open you back up here and have you, super sensitive and all that. But prior to any of that, did you have like any type of belief? Like, before the accident, did you have like a belief in like a higher power, or, or anything of that sort?
Yes, you could say that through our father and mother, I have 3 brothers, through our father and mother, they were taking us as young teenagers to what's called a spiritualist church, where there is a study of nature, a study of you could call it nature spirits, other subtler realms, the spirit guides, guardian angels, where people go to the higher astral realm when they transition out of this human dimension, you could say, out of this 3D reality. So my mother and father would be taking us to that. And after my car accident, that's why I went back to that also, to be very dedicated to that study. Also, my father was a police officer, a officer in charge of a large criminal investigation branch in Australia, in Melbourne. So he had a natural sense of very strong authority. He grew up without a mother and father, grew up in a boys' home, so he suffered tremendously. And he became a very amazingly dedicated, self-made man, so to speak, focusing on really being successful in the world no matter what, and always trying to do his best for the goodness, you could say. So he did his best to really provide for us. And the same for my mother. She grew up through tremendous hardship. So they were my mentors, you could say, my mother and father in the beginning. So always reminding us about goodness, about loving one another. Dad always talking to us about always being total, living your life with intensity, always looking another person in the eyes, always giving yourself to them, so to speak, But of course, they came from a broken background, tremendously wounded childhood, tremendous suffering. So that started to manifest at a certain point, but out of my own conscious awareness, because as children you're starting to watch all, you could say, the conflicts start to seep in, a certain amount of the dysfunctionality building up and adding to the children in the family, and so on and so on. There's a great deal of suffering happening in the family. It was extraordinary. That in itself then became a project for me to really, how do I become free of this suffering? Even though I've grown up with these beautiful ethics of, you could say, spiritualism, I was also then immersed in tremendous family dysfunctionality that was escalating. and not by anybody's fault. It was just natural byproduct of unawareness, you could say. And now and the next project is how to become free of this suffering. And it was sometimes an intense psychic madhouse at home. Crazy with 4 boys and mother and father, you know. So spiritualism, going back into the spiritualist church at that point, was a safe haven for me. It was helping me from that car accident to actually bring that back into home, even though I couldn't make much of a change in the house itself. At least I could bring that quality of, you could say, like an oasis back into my bedroom. Yeah. And my bedroom was my oasis in the family home at that point, with a candle of a night time, doing my readings, doing a silent meditation. So that spiritualism, which was very much Christian-based in some sense also, or you could say Christ-based. I would say more like Christ-based, because there was a great love for the Christ, but there was also an awareness of other great, you could say, spiritual teachers over thousands of years. There was a study of that. We weren't denying that in the spiritualist church. We were welcoming those other great spiritual luminaries that have emerged throughout thousands of years, emerged in order to help humanity, in order to be a brother or a sister, to help other brothers and sisters. So I grew up with this awareness.
No, I think that is really important to acknowledge, you know, others that came like before and played like a huge part. So I like that you had that foundation there. So you're 22. We started from 19 up to 22. Boom, thrown into this awakening, and you got a huge responsibility that was given to you. It's like, one, you know, for yourself and understanding it, but then to also, you know, help with the family, you know, because that's the generational curses, right? The generational cycles that just keeps going and going and going until someone says, hey, enough is enough. It stops with me, you know. So you, as far as helping like with your family, but then also you take on this role where you want to help raise the consciousness of humanity. That's huge. 22 years old. That's a lot. that's a lot. So where did you go from there? Like, I mean, just 22, not even, I mean, oh, and let's not forget, it's still a car accident that you don't remember. So then there's, you know, that too, that gets you there. Like, where did you go from, like, you know, at that young age? Like, were you guided to say, like, hey, you need to go into the community, do these talks, or do this, like, or do that? Like, what was that path like?
Okay, so during that time of the mediumship and psychic development, between 21 and 22, I also started going to a technical college, and I was studying an electronic technician course. And in the second year of it, this state I was already starting to enter because of the car accident and also the meditations at home. I would be in the class, and what was happening was that I was going into a state of what's referred to in the Eastern mystical teachings, the state of no mind. I was going into a state of no mind in the middle of a class. So I'd be listening to the teacher speak, and all of a sudden I'm hearing the sounds of his or her words. I can hear them rolling out of his mouth, and all I could hear was the sound of the words, but not one word made a sense. All I was, and then all of a sudden I could feel this spaciousness inside, like an emptiness inside of me, being consciousness, and I was in a state of no mind. I didn't know how to describe it at the time, but I knew that it was very significant. So I would start laughing in the middle of it, uncontrollably, because the laughter would come by itself, and I'd have to excuse myself many times and then run to the bathroom to contain myself. Come back in, sit down, same thing would happen again, run out again. Then I'd ask my buddy, what is the teacher talking about? I'd look down at him, he's trying to tell me, And all of a sudden, I'm hearing just the sound of his voice. I'm in a state of no mind. So out of that, after 2 weeks or so of that happening, I came home and I said to Mum and Dad, I have to quit. I can't continue. I'm going to live a spiritual life. So that's when I started to research meditation deeper and researching this whole phenomena of no mind and also Eastern mystical teachings. And I knew that I had to find a mentor, a spiritual mentor. And so that's what I went looking for. And I found a number of mentors over the years, but there was one or two that were significant. One of them was from India, which I don't want to mention right now. He's passed away some time ago. There was also another one in the Fijian Islands who's passed away. And then many years later, I came across one in Australia, which I had no idea that there would be even a spiritual teacher in such a country as Australia, right?
Yeah, which is where you're at right now, Australia.
That's right. And this particular spiritual teacher, even the Eckhart Tolle, who wrote the book The Power of Now, has also acknowledged this mentor that I sat with, because Eckhart Tolle also used to sit with this particular mentor also in Australia. And so through this one specific Indian teacher, through the first 2 or 3 years of being with him, he was very professed, so to speak, with knowing how to awaken the latent energies in the body in order to open up what is referred to the higher chakras, the higher intelligence centers, the high intelligence center of the brain as well, the pineal gland, the pituitary, through awakening what is referred to as the kundalini. And I think within the first 1 year of being involved with him, well, lo and behold, I had a major awakening of that in my body. And when it did erupt, so to speak, it was like a volcano going off. And it was so tangible, it literally shook me to my roots and blew my mind once again. The reality of it, the experience of that level of electromagnetic energy moving through the body and what it awakened for something else again was phenomenal. And the very first experience was I went into fits of laughter and then crying and then laughter and crying all in the one sitting, and then eventually laughing and crying at the exact same time. And it was pure bliss once again, but a different quality of bliss, because now it was physical also. Tremendous, what I would refer to as physical ecstasy in a true sense. And it was beyond anything I have experienced once again. Rather than it just being that bliss or that quality of that tremendous fineness of illumination through the body, it was now tangible through the body, coming from the roots up. It was like there was something else entering my system. From that point, there was like another level of initiation that took place, which was connected right back to that great longing that I had, that was left somehow hovering still from that time of being rejected by my very first love. So you're seeing the picture here. That very first love left that rejection there left a very deep, somehow my energy in a standstill on some level, and it left this deep wound around the ecstasy of love on a physical level and on a spiritual level, because that's what I started to experience with her. But now, all these years later, here I am with my spiritual mentor, where there's an awakening of the Kundalini, but then that Kundalini awakening is also then activating what I refer to as being graced by divine love. And in that moment, when I started to experience the grace of divine love, wow, that's what my soul was longing for. That's what I was wanting to share with my very first beloved, that I couldn't go any further with. That is what my soul recognized every human being's heart is longing for, to receive the grace of divine love. And it was so tangible, it just brought me to the sweetness, tremendous sweetness of crying. And I don't mean crying out of pain. It was a crying out of almost like disbelief, the crying out of gratitude, the crying out of, oh my God, oh my beloved is everywhere around me. And now the beloved mystery is gracing me and saying, you're okay. You're okay, beloved. You are loved as you are. You are loved as you are. And in that recognition that I'm being loved as I am and feeling it, not being told it, but feeling it, that was the beginning of what I refer to as empowerment, true heart empowerment, in order to be very focused now with my vision of being able to dedicate my life to helping others to awaken to, or to at least come to find the courage to come into this delicate space, to open up their soul and their hearts to that degree of sensitivity, regardless of their previous maybe wounding or dislocation or sense of lack of worth. I knew that that's what I needed to do. How do I nurture another human being? How do I invite them into this very delicate space? So that was like the cherry on top of the cake, so to speak.
Oh my gosh, which is something that so I'll go back. I personally do believe this. I believe we all came here to evolve and grow and operate from a place of love. But it's like, how can we operate from this place of love when we don't even know what love is? And we don't know what love is because either we were taught it was something else, or now it's scary, so we want to stay away from it and we shut it down. And I personally can speak on that when it comes to like love. Like, I know that my heart's been, off, for a long time. It was like, you won't hurt me. No. So you avoid it so much. And being on this journey, I understand the importance of love, and that love is not what I was taught when I was younger, or, in even the romantic sense, of like the case, just all around, like, that's not it. And here I am now, 39, and I'm just giving permission for my heart to open up to it. Like, literally, like a couple days ago, I'm like, okay, I surrender. Like, I surrender, and I'm open to fully receiving what this is. And I know a lot of people are nowhere near that. It is completely shut off, afraid of it, and there's just this fear. And when I look back on it and stuff, like, it makes me sad, because I know what I experienced and how I shut it off, and how, opening, myself up to love, what it can do, right? And so I definitely commend you for just like understanding that and going through what you went through and saying, no, I'm going to help people, because this is amazing. You describing that, I'm so jealous. I'm like, I need that. Like, I need that. So, this is your mission. And I think this is great. So is this what led up to the book? Or was there other things like in between, and just going that route, you're like, I gotta put this in a book. I need to get this out to, really to the masses, where people can just sit and they can really, take this in like their own comfort, and, have their own experiences, or what. I like to read, so that's me. I'm explaining my situation. I love a book, and and just deep peace and beyond suffering. I mean, just that word suffering right there is just like, So many of us are suffering from so many different things.
May I respond to that? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Tisha. So, in 1991, 1990, 91, 92, somewhere during that period was the original first downloading of the book. I had no intention to write a book, but I knew I was already writing some beautiful, spontaneous insights and poetry and songs, mostly songs a lot of the time, and every so often insights coming through. And I wasn't trying to write songs. They would just come through as an overflowing expression of my heart being in pure delight in different moments, spontaneous moments of waves of delight coming through because of that experience of being graced by divine love, because of that experience of knowing that potency of that Kundalini awakening, you could say. And when that download came, it was more like an indication from life saying, here is a window. Here is what I want you to say. Here's what you need to say. Not just in a book, but physically when you're in people's company, we're in their presence also. In order to invite them in so that the book and the message is a window to be able to be immersed in the presence that you and I are even immersed in as you are listening to me in this moment, as you have your fist like that, as I have my hands like this. We are listening, both of us are listening, and we are alternating with our speaking, and we are simultaneously immersed in a certain presence, regardless of our awareness focusing on it or not. It's there 24/7, no matter what. So when the book downloaded, it was life saying, use this as a window to this. So the very first time this book came through saying, this is the first opening words, what you see now, what you hear now, what you feel now, what you are aware of now is all there is now. So, and it goes on more and more. I won't go into the rest of it, but that book came through and I titled it The Power of Now. But it was titled The Power of N.O.W. In 1996, when I was living in Los Angeles, I was looking into publishing it, and I was having difficulty with that, and I realized it's not time to publish this yet. It would be too soon, because of the way it was written, it turns into a conversation between the voice of the heart and the voice of the world, the voice of mind. So that they go into an argument in this dialogue between one another. And the heart is always responding back, endeavoring to remind the voice of the world what it's forgotten, what it really longs for. So it is a dialogue in the beginning of the book. But at that time in 1991-92, when it first came through, that's all that came through. It was a pure dialogue between the voice of the heart and the voice of the world. So in calling it the power of N.O.W, the now, I was using that as a window in order to invite people in, and this is what any teacher does. We invite others into the now so that we can be immersed in the presence, the mystery of this presence of the divine, the presence of divine love that is so subtle that it requires a very dedicated relaxation into the mystery of this presence, a dedicated relaxing into the subtlety and refinement of awareness without going into thinking ahead, without trying to philosophize, without any rhetoric, but using all the languaging, the wording to invite and draw one another into this subtle immersion. And sometimes it's not so easy to see, though, or even to identify what is the subtlety of this presence. So that's why then over years and years' time, the book came around, of course, because of circumstance of a certain book coming out under that title also, a few years later in the States. It was natural that that book came out to being titled Deep Peace Beyond Suffering, because ultimately peace is the fragrance of divine love. And it was that quality of peace that I recognized in my own family lineage that we were losing touch with during those last 3 or 4 or 5 years when I was living at home. And we were all missing that peace. So our suffering was escalating as that peace was disappearing. So that's why then it was natural, it just somehow evolved into, of course, deep peace beyond suffering. But that doesn't necessarily mean to go beyond suffering, to how to get free of suffering. No, something totally different. How do we welcome the suffering? Because this is the journey in existence. How do we embrace that? How do we see the pearl within?
My gosh, I'm getting all my notes and stuff. This has really been interesting. So this is to kind of take it, and then I'll come back. So I had been myself putting out there, reaching, just connecting to my guides and saying, like, I want to go deeper. I really need to go deeper because I'm really just the surface level of this awakening. And I know that I'm meant to go deeper. And I'm like, I need a teacher and I need this mentor, but I need to go deep. And I don't know what deep means. I just know that was the feeling. And like, as you're talking, I'm literally hearing, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I'm like, this is it. So I'm just like, it's so deep, like into like what you're saying. Like, I mean, download for this book in 91, 92, like it was so ahead of its time, like in, you know, because there's no such thing as time, right? You know, in the spiritual world, just wow. I don't even know honestly, I don't even know what to say. Like, just wow, like this is just so much, like, to really take in. But I do want to go back to just the, you know, for the context of like the listeners, when it comes to this thing with love, there's so many people that are cut off, you know, and that have shut off and not open, or like the ex-girlfriend, like afraid and just willing to just, whoa, this is too much. Like, what would you say to them? Like someone now who's so afraid of it, what would you tell them? Like something that they can just do, or just to like help them to even start this process, to just to know that it's okay to open up to it.
That's a very wide.
I know.
Can we narrow that a little bit so I can respond? Otherwise, it's
So if I'm a listener, and I've had, because you know some of them are my clients, you know, they're just truly afraid. of love in any sense, like because they don't want to get hurt, so they avoid everything, getting close to people, speaking their truth or whatever, like the case, whether it's a friendship or even it's like romance, they just avoid different things because they don't want to get hurt because of something that's happened in their childhood. But they also don't want to tackle what happened as a child. And I know, and we do need to go there. We do need to feel the pain. We do need to whatever, if you're going to a therapist or counselor or whatever the case is that you're seeking, doing some shadow work, inner child. And a lot of people are just so afraid. And so I guess, like, what would you say to them? If that breaks it down anymore, like
As a human being, we are creatures that are moved by the pleasure principle. We are moved by the pleasure principle. What pleasures our bodies, what pleasures our heart, what pleasures our mind, what pleasures our spirit. There have been many moments in my life also where I've gone through certain phases, even after all these different awakenings, where I've lived alone for long periods of time. I've lived maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years aloneness, and during those times being so tender, sometimes having to clear some family history, you could say, some residue of trauma out of my cells of my body, out of my heart, out of my nervous system. So during those times when I'm recognizing that, yes, I am wanting to also be in that quality, immersed in love, and yet I don't want to be vulnerable and go to a party or go to a coffee shop or go to some event, or if I do, I dread having been there. I come home and I swear, no, I don't want to do that again. Many of us can relate to this sort of thing. So I would say to any woman or man that is in a very delicate, fragile state, even if they believe or feel that they know that they have never experienced love as far as they can remember, somewhere inside the divine essence of who they really are behind the masks of personality, the intelligence of their intrinsic consciousness knows what it is. So therefore, if I'm a single person and I'm in that state, my quest would be, how do I return to that? If all my engaging in the physical world of outward turn of attention to the activity of this, the activity of that, the activity of entrepreneurship, activity of some sort of entertainment, activity of a goal-oriented dream I want to fulfill, all of that is still keeping my attention outward turned, and it's keeping me in a subtle form of avoidance or evading of my intrinsic intelligence, my original being, which is I am consciousness, one without a second. Therefore, that tells me that I need to turn my attention back around. What have many of the teachers, whether it be Western or Eastern teachers, said to us for centuries, and even in this last year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, so many mentors, coaches, life coaches, spiritual luminaries arising all over at the moment. Always return to stillness. Meditation. Learn to be still. Sometimes, though, just sitting in stillness, it can seem dry. Meditation can seem dry. If you feel that there is a bubbling up, a welling up of, you could say, subtle soul pain that's still there because your longing, your soul is craving for that something that's almost intangible, but you know that it's thirsty, then what I used to do many times in my lowness, I would put on a beautiful music, a song or a CD or a playlist, or even back in the day I'd put on a 78 record, or I'd put on an audio tape, a CD, with just a compilation of music that would evoke such a sense of like, this is what spirit feels to me. The spirit of love feels to me. This is the sort of music I would choose to put on, so it would evoke my heart up into this sense of euphoria, as if, yes, I'm going to lift myself up into this grand space of spiritual love in those moments. And in that moment of listening to the songs, all of a sudden, maybe just whether it be instrumental song or whether there was beautiful words evoking what I'm really desiring, what I'm longing for, and I hear just the right phrase sung, maybe by Mariah Carey or whoever it may be, some beautiful singer, then all of a sudden, just the right way, the right tone, it would crack the heart open, and I'd go into crying. And that's the moment that I was looking for, so that you could say that cage that I had created around the heart to protect myself from, that was also encaging me in, I needed that cage to be cracked open. So just the right words, the right melody, the right sound of the voice or the sound of the instruments, giving that euphoric sense of not just emotional love, but really a higher sense, a high calling of what would love look like on a higher level, so to speak, on a mystic level. That's what I was looking for. And then as soon as it would crack open, under the guidance of my mentor, which he had given me some, you could say some guidance many years prior to that, he would say, go into the crying. Immerse yourself in crying. Become the crying, so that you allow your heart to be the window that releases all the suffering in that moment that you are capable of letting go of in that moment. Now, it might be a little bit scary, but when you're in your bedroom and you're shutting the door, you're putting on the right music, put on a candle, create the atmosphere that you want to evoke inside of your own heart, where nobody's going to judge you whatsoever. Have a pillow there in case you're a little bit too close to some others, which I've had to do before also. So you put the pillow up into your face, so to speak. And then as soon as you start to feel the heart the cage starting to crack open, like the shell of the egg starting to crack, let that yolk, let all of that pour out, and then become the crying. And when you do, if you can find the courage to go into the depths of crying and trust in that, you will be amazed where that takes you inside, and how much it will cleanse the heart. It will cleanse you tremendously. Your nervous system, your body, your eyes, your head, you'll feel like you're just having like a purification. You're being washed. In a sense, it's like a form of you could say like a spirit baptism, but not in a religious sense. It is a true spirit baptism. But in those moments when you're letting go, if you start to feel somehow a link to the suffering of your mother or of your father or brother or sister, let that come through as well. Or if you're starting to turn into some anger and rage towards somebody, coming through that tears, let that go as well. Let it pour out through so that you become the sorrow. And as that sorrow takes you down into the depths of your being, you will enter a moment of such clarity, of such openness. The chalice of your heart will be filled anew. It is simple as this. There's no doing for it. You're not crying out anymore. You're not begging. You're not demanding. You're not praying for it. But it becomes a prayer. It becomes prayerful, but without words. But in that willingness to let go and to be empty, in that pure emptiness, there is a sense of purity and freedom from the suffering in that moment. And then the heart and the whole body is filled with the grace of divine love. It's automatic, it will happen. But if that's not happening yet, that's okay. Just keep going a little deeper. And if it doesn't happen in the first time, maybe it may take a number of rounds. It may take a number of days, maybe weeks or months yet, as you're gathering courage to go down into the depths of your soul. But remember, you're the only one that's there. In one sense, there's no other human personality around you to judge you or condemn you or tell you that's this or that, or to criticize you. No, there's not. There's just you. So you get to bear witness to all the voices, and then you can let them go. Let it go. Let it go. Let it go. And then just be immersed in the solitude of your own autonomous being, in your own authenticity. And there are times, though, I must admit, I still had my mentor there in the background, so to speak. I was connected to him. So if I needed to reach out, he was there. If I needed to listen to him speaking on a video, or listen to him speaking through one of his books, then that would be the encouragement. Just to be linked up with him. He was a brother, but yet he was my spiritual mentor. Just a guide, that's all. Not a teacher per se, but yet in the modern contemporary times we refer to somebody like that as being a spiritual teacher. But really, in a sense, even my function is just to be and provide mentorship, to be a guide, to be a brother who can encourage another sister or a brother, saying, it's okay, just keep breathing, be there, stay there, that's right, just be there in that space there. And it's okay, just let go a little bit more, as much as you can handle.
Yeah.
And then in those moments of when I was immersed, and just a brief recognition of his face or brief remembrance of his standing still, being there as a guide for me, that was enough for me to let go again a bit more. So I knew I had a mentor. I knew I had a mentor who was holding my hand, so to speak. A brother was holding my hand. And this is the case for all human beings. We're always growing up with somebody who has to hold our hand as we're crossing the street, or to stop us from running across the street because we're not noticing a truck or cars or bicycles coming down. So an elder, somebody who's a little bit more aware in that moment, just a little bit more aware, with a little bit more maturation, is there to help nurture us until we've grown enough. So that's the function of a spiritual teacher, of a mentor. Not to be a master of somebody, not at all. No. Just to be a dear friend.
I love it. It's giving people that permission to receive that help, to be open to receive, the help. I love it.
Yes, and I would like to just add to that. I appreciate what you just said then also, Tisha, is that this is one of the reasons why I am now offering also, for example, the free webinars with no attachment whatsoever, which is just called Unity Within, because I recognize that, well, if I can't reach enough people right now on a physical level because of certain circumstances where I'm living, and I'm not back in the States yet, I'm still in Australia, I want to still be available. Because during that 30 minutes, even if it's just a 30-minute presence on the internet, who knows what soul I may be able to support or even help out of a life-death situation, or maybe help them at that precise moment just before they transition, or at that moment where they need that little bit of encouragement to let go of their pattern of suffering over their suffering, so that they can really go into the depths of suffering to experience the awakening of their heart again. So that's why I love to offer that, because we need to be able to be available for one another, not in a capacity where we can remind one another that it's not just about monetizing our gifts, monetizing our skills, monetizing and shaping and entrepreneuring what we have to offer to the world. It's actually about being available right here, right now, in this moment, because if a soul comes to me and they have no money and they're desperate, yes, I will welcome them completely, no matter what, because that's what they need in this moment. They are a part of me, as I am an extension of them.
I can appreciate that, and I'm sure the listeners will appreciate that too. So that's a free webinar, and it's going to be held, is it on Wednesdays?
Wednesdays.
Okay.
And yes, that's what that's.
Oh, I'm gonna be on this webinar. I'm gonna be on these webinars for sure, and I'm gonna make sure from all of the listeners, all of you out there, I'll make sure that I have it in the show notes, so that way they can they know exactly where to access not only the webinar, but anything like your talks and book and all the information. I'll make sure everybody will be able to access all of that. But what were you gonna say? I'm sorry.
Usually in most interviews, I don't speak of my events, because I'm usually so immersed in just the dialogue and the sharing and the communication between you and I right now, and what the mystery of love wants to share and speak through me right now, that this is all there is and this is all that matters. And I prefer not to even speak about, okay, well, this is my website and this is where you can find me and this is what I'm doing, these are my events, come to this, because that's like stepping into out of what this natural, sharing is about. And this is where I love to be immersed in. I love to be in this, rather than speaking about what I'm doing. And yet after any interviews, many times either my PA or different friends or a certain other peers would say, Shivallah, why didn't you mention this? Why didn't you say that? I said, well, I was immersed. I was loving sharing and being with this new friend.
I love that, and I appreciate it like 100%. However,
Yes.
My listeners are,
Yes.
while they're listening, they're Googling, they're going to the show notes and they're looking it up and stuff and all that great. But that shows a lot about you. So it definitely shows a lot about you. But I get it. It's just bringing like the spirituality with like the practicality. So like you've given me so much, so I know that my listeners are taking in so much, and I know they're gonna want to follow you. They're gonna want to learn more from you. They're gonna connect with you one-on-one or just to see and just listen, whatever it is. I know they're gonna like want that connection, so I want to make sure that they have all of that. So don't worry, I got you.
Thank you,
your
Tisha.
PAs and stuff, I got you.
Thank you, Tisha.
My listeners, because they'll be asking me, they'll be sending me a message like, so where can I like for this? And I actually, it's funny because I was doing I did a reading on one of my clients yesterday, and her husband were on speakerphone. So when I was through with like her, like she got on speakerphone and he was talking, and then I don't know how it came up, but I said I was going to be interviewing you today, and I was like, oh, hold on, and I went in there and I sent your link. So then we were just talking, and then it came back, and then he said he downloaded like your music that was on there, like the meditation is something about like the sound healing. I can't remember exactly what he
Satsang. Sonic Satsang,
said.
sound healing meditation. Yes.
Yes. He was like, it was so, which was all perfect. So he said he downloaded and he thought that was just fascinating because that's where he's been led to. And I was like, oh, so it makes sense why this even came up in the conversation and all of that, because he needed that. He needed that. So, I thought that was really interesting too. So they want to know, they want to get this information and stuff. So, well, this has been a lot, and I feel like we need to do a part 2. We just need to like have you back on and go even deeper, like for sure. But before we get off, is there anything that that's coming to you that you want to put out there, or you feel that's on your heart that you just want to get out?
I look forward to part 2.
Me too. So now that we've had this so much stuff, I'm just like my own little downloads that's coming up. I'm just jotting everything down because I know that this needs to go like, this needs to go deeper.
Tisha, may I just highlight something for a moment?
Absolutely.
Why I went still there for a moment and silent is because that is what I did want to say, was the stillness and the silence there for a moment, because sometimes there is a very unique transmission that's taking place through the eyes, through the presence, through heart itself, that transpires through silence. And quite often in this very busy world and very mind-oriented, functional world, we have not really been educated into the language of the heart so much on a world stage level, you could say, on a global level. And yet we know it in different ways. We experience it in many different ways, in special, intimate moments. But in a moment like this is also part of the communication, those still moments, those silent moments, because we are aligning with one another. And that's why I said to you initially that the book, Deep Peace Beyond Suffering, is a window to invite people into a subtle, delicate immersion with the mystery of the presence of divine love. And sometimes this is why I say to my PA and to different friends, writing the book it's kind of like secondary to me being the book. I am the book. So I'm endeavoring to learn how to translate that into written form, because it's ongoing every day for me. So to be able to use the book to invite others to, whether it be a podcast or a webinar, or even just to an actual audio book, or even maybe to a live event, it's so that the mystery of life can use this one as an agent, you could say, a human agent for being a catalytic agent.
I like that. I am the book. You know what? You just saying that, this is so crazy. You know, you can't make this stuff up, right? I'm in the middle of writing a book that was given to me, you know, downloaded, but I keep getting stuck. And I'm like, okay, I got to get this creativity and everything. But just you saying that alone, just, I am the book. I am the book. I just got to get it out there onto the words. I'm the book. Great affirmation. I'm the book. Thank you. That was for me. That was definitely for me. So thank you. And for any of my other listeners that's, you know, want to write a book and think of it, you are the book. Right? I am the book. Okay. Well, yeah, we'll definitely, we definitely have to do part 2 of this. But I thank you so much, like, for, again, taking time to even, like, share your knowledge and share your wisdom. And I'm taking back, and not only am I looking forward to doing part 2 with you, I'm looking forward to just learning from you. And then eventually meeting you in person, because I'm coming to Australia, manifesting it, 2020, coming to Australia.
Wonderful, wonderful. And in the next meeting, maybe we have to stand up and do a dance. I'm joking.
Oh my God, that would totally be out of my comfort zone, but I probably need to do that. And that's why you said that.
Well,
that would be awesome.
As you can hear towards the end of this interview, even, you can hear that the tonality of my voice and my demeanor is quietening down and becoming more, you could say, a little bit more refined, a little bit more delicate and gentle, which is natural, the way love is expressing itself, the way life is expressing itself. However, I also love to dance. And when I dance, I love being danced by spirit. Once again, it's about surrendering to the spirit of love for it to dance through this body. And that can be, sometimes that can look wild. It can look like a 3-year-old child going crazy. Who knows? Or it can be very beautiful and flowing. Who knows? So yes, I would love to dance with you. And I look forward to you coming to Australia, Tisha.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's on my board. I've written it in my book. It's in my manifesting book. I've said it to a couple of people, so that way I definitely have to do it. You know, once you tell somebody you're going to Australia, you got to go. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tisha. Thank you.
Okay. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.